Morella by Edgar Allan Poe.
Autocat, auto met auto, mono eides aion. Itself, alone, by itself, eternally one and single. Plato, Sympos.
With a feeling of deep but most singular affection, I regarded my friend Morella. Thrown by accident into her society many years ago, my soul from our first meeting burned with fires it had never known. But the fires were not of eros, and bitter and tormenting to my eager spirit was the gradual conviction that I could in no manner define their unusual meaning or regulate their vague intensity. Yet we met, and fate bound us together at the altar, and I never spoke of love or thought of passion. She, however, shunned society, and attaching herself to me alone, rendered me happy. It is a happiness to wonder. It is a happiness to dream. Morella's erudition was profound. As I hoped to live, her talents were of no common order. Her powers of mind were gigantic. I felt this, and in many matters became her pupil. I soon, however, found that Morella, perhaps on account of her Pressburg education, laid before me a number of those mystical writings which are usually considered the mere dross of the early German literature. These, for what reasons I could not imagine, were her favorite and constant study, and that in process of time they became my own, should be attributed to the simple but effectual influence of habit and example. In all this, if I err not, my reason had little to do. My convictions, or I forget myself, were in no manner acted upon by my imagination, nor was any tincture of the mysticism which I read to be discovered, unless I am greatly mistaken, either in my deeds or in my thoughts. Feeling deeply persuaded of this, I abandoned myself more implicitly to the guidance of my wife, and entered with a bolder spirit into the intricacy of her studies. And then, when poring over forbidden pages I felt the spirit kindle within me, would Morella place her cold hand upon my own, and rake up from the ashes of a dead philosophy some low singular words, whose strange meaning burnt themselves in upon my memory. And then hour after hour would I linger by her side, and dwell upon the music of her thrilling voice, until at length its melody was tinged with terror, and fell like a shadow upon my soul, and I grew pale, and shuddered inwardly at those two unearthly tones. And thus joy suddenly faded into horror, and the most beautiful became the most hideous, as Hinnon became Gehenna. It is unnecessary to state the exact character of these disquisitions, which, growing out of the volumes I have mentioned, formed for so long a time almost the sole conversation of Morella and myself. By the learned in what might be termed theological morality, they will be readily conceived, and by the unlearned they would, at all events, be little understood. The will pantheism of Fichte, the modified
Polygenesia
of the Pythagoreans, and above all the doctrines of identity as urged by Schelling, were generally the points of discussion presenting the most of beauty to the imaginative Morella. That identity which is not improperly called personal, I think Mr. Locke truly defines to consist in the sameness of a rational being. And since by person we understand an intelligent essence having reason, and since there is a consciousness which always accompanies thinking, it is this which makes us all to be that which we call ourselves, thereby distinguishing us from other beings that think and giving us our personal identity. But the principium individuationis, the notion of that identity, which at death is or is not lost forever, was to me at all times a consideration of intense interest, not more from the mystical and exciting nature of its consequences than from the marked and agitated manner in which Morella mentioned them. But indeed the time had now arrived when the mystery of my wife's manner oppressed me like a spell. I could no longer bear the touch of her wan fingers, nor the low tone of her musical language, nor the lustre of her melancholy eyes. And she knew all this but did not upbraid. She seemed conscious of my weakness or my folly, and smiling called it fate. She seemed also conscious of a cause, to me unknown, for the gradual alienation of my regard, but she gave me no hint or token of its nature. Yet was she woman and pined away daily. In time the crimson spot settled steadily upon the cheek, and the blue veins upon the pale forehead became prominent, and one instant my nature melted into pity, but in the next I met the glance of her meaning eyes, and my soul sickened and became giddy with the giddiness of one who gazes downward into some dreary and fathomless abyss. Shall I then say that I longed with an earnest and consuming desire for the moment of Morella's decease? I did. But the fragile spirit clung to its tenement of clay for many days, for many weeks, and irksome months, until my tortured nerves obtained the mastery over my mind, and I grew furious with delay, and with the heart of a fiend I cursed the days and the hours and the bitter moments which seemed to lengthen and lengthen as her gentle life declined, like shadows in the dying of the day. But one autumnal evening, when the winds lay still in heaven, Morella called me to her side. There was a dim mist over all the earth, and a warm glow upon the waters, and amid the rich October leaves of the forest, a rainbow from the firmament had surely fallen. As I came, she was murmuring in a low undertone, which trembled with fervour, the words of a Catholic hymn. Sancta Maria, turn thine eyes upon the sinner's sacrifice of fervent prayer, and humble love from thy holy throne above. At morn, at noon, at twilight dim, Maria, thou hast heard my hymn. In joy and woe, in good and ill, Mother of God, be with me still. When my hours flew gently by, and no storms were in the sky, my soul, lest it should truant be, thy love did guide to thine and thee. Now when clouds of fate o'ercast all my present and my past, let my future radiant shine with sweet hopes of thee and thine. This is a day unlike any other, said Morella, a day when all is decided whether to live or to depart. It is a bright day for those who walk the path of life, yet an even greater one for those who journey beyond. Pause for it. I turned toward her, and she continued. Pause. Ones. I am leaving this world, yet I shall endure. That is why I have no fear of what lies ahead. No darkness can haunt me, mark my words, not even the passage of time itself. You have never truly loved me, yet the one you distanced yourself from in life, you shall remember in death. Pause ones. Morella! Pause ones. I say it again. My end is near, but within me remains a part of what once connected us. And when my spirit fades, the child shall live, yours and mine, Morella's. Yet your days shall be touched by sorrow, the kind that lingers unyielding, like the oldest trees that withstand the storms of time. The moments of your happiness have passed, for joy does not come twice in one lifetime, just as the roses of Paestum do not bloom in every season. You shall not wander through time in careless delight, but instead you will carry the weight of remembrance like a traveller who never lays down his burdens. Pause. Ones. Morella! I cried. Morella! How can you know this? But she turned her face to the pillow, and with a faint tremor, she fell silent forever. Yet, as she had foreseen, the child she had brought into the world with her last breath, who did not live until the mother was gone, survived, and she grew with an uncanny swiftness, both in body and mind, bearing a perfect resemblance to the one who had departed. And I loved her with an intensity beyond what I had ever believed possible. Pause. Ones. But soon the light of this love dimmed. Shadows of doubt and unease crept in like an approaching storm. The child's growth was rapid, unnaturally so. But even more unsettling than were the thoughts that took hold of me as I watched her mind unfold. How could it be otherwise when I saw in her the understanding of an adult within the frame of a child? When words of wisdom beyond her years passed from her lips? When the depth of experience and emotion flickered in her eyes, far too knowing, far too aware? When all of this became undeniable, when I could no longer ignore or rationalize it, is it any wonder that fear took root within me? That my thoughts turned to the strange stories and unsettling theories that had once surrounded Morella? I withdrew my daughter from the world's gaze, sheltering her in the quiet isolation of my ancestral home, watching over her with an anxious dread I dared not name. And as the years passed, each day I gazed upon her gentle, almost sacred face and studied the graceful changes in her form. I began to notice subtle resemblances between the child and her mother. Shades of sorrow and a quiet, somber grace. Over time, these hints of likeness deepened, becoming ever more pronounced and, to me, increasingly unsettling. I could accept that her smile recalled her mother's, yet I trembled at how perfectly it mirrored that familiar expression. Her eyes, echoing Morella's own, I could endure, until they too often seemed to peer into the depths of my soul with that same intense, mysterious gaze. In the curve of her high forehead, in the soft ringlets of her hair, in the delicate way her fingers played upon it, in the gentle musicality of her voice, and above all, in the expressions that carried the weight of loss and longing, I found both a profound nourishment for thought and a lingering sense of dread, as if touched by a ceaseless, haunting affliction. Thus passed 10 years of her life, and yet my daughter remained nameless in the eyes of the world. My child and my love were the only names a father's heart could offer, for the strict seclusion of her days allowed no other encounter. Morella's name faded with her own passing, and I had never spoken of the mother to the daughter. It was, in truth, impossible to do. In her brief existence, the child had absorbed only the limited impressions offered by a confined life. At length, however, the ceremony of baptism arrived, and in my agitated state, it brought a fleeting promise of escape from my destined horrors. At the baptismal font, I hesitated in naming her, as countless titles, from ancient wisdom to modern grace, from my own lands and beyond, crowded my thoughts, each a tender tribute to what is gentle, joyful, and good. What drove me then to disturb the memories of the past? What inner force urged me to utter a single sound that stirred my very blood, causing it to pulse from temple to heart? What whisper, emerging from the depths of my soul amid dim, silent aisles made me cry out to the holy man, those syllables, Morella? And what mysterious power, more potent than any fiend, seemed to alter my child's features with a tint of sorrow as she turned her gaze upward and, falling gently upon the dark stones of her ancestral vault, responded, "I am here." In that moment, a distinct, cold and solemn tone, like the toll of a death knell, seemed to echo within me. Years may roll away, but the memory of that epoch remains indelible. Now, though I had long forgotten the beauty of blooming flowers and lush vines, the shadows of sombre hemlock and steadfast cypress loomed over me day and night. I lost all reckoning of time and place as the guiding stars of my fate faded, and my spirit grew increasingly dark. Figures drifted by like fleeting shadows, yet in each I saw only Morella. The winds above carried but one refrain, and even the gentle ripples upon the sea murmured evermore, "Morella." But she passed, and with my own hands I bore her to her final rest. I laughed then, a long, bitter laugh, as I discovered no trace of the warmth I once knew in the quiet chamber where I laid her down.